G'day everyone. Just want to, I'm just going to go through and play a press release from New South Wales Premier Minns, Labor, and the Australian Labor Party Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Their press releases recently or this week on the gun laws and the hate speech laws, which they're going to try and bundle in together and put through together as one piece of legislation, which I personally think is a very, very dangerous act for them to be doing. But let's just get on with this. I will stop it occasionally through it and just give you my opinion and sort of disseminate what they're saying a little bit. So yeah, just bear with me. Hope you you stay to the end, and if you like it, please share, like, subscribe. Here we go. We've got the usual preamble to start with from the Prime Minister.
The Representatives and the Senate. The plan is to have a condolence motion debated in both houses on Monday. It will be an opportunity for the Parliament to come together and convey our sympathies to the loved ones of those.
This is from the Prime Minister, who couldn't be bothered going to not one of the Jewish funerals for these people killed at Bondi, but he went to I believe it may have been a Catholic funeral, the very last one. He went to there with bells on and media and that, but he did not attend any of the Jewish funerals, and I think that says a lot.
Murdered by these terrorists on Bondi Beach on the 14th of December. There will be a suspension of that to enable the Attorney-General to introduce legislation which will then lay on the table. The bill is the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill. It's a comprehensive package of reforms which creates serious offences for hate preachers and leaders seeking to radicalise young Australians. It increases the penalties for hate crimes offences. It ensures that offenders whose crimes were motivated by extremism have that factored into their sentencing. It creates a new offence for inciting hatred in order to...
So basically, any form of free speech against, if you don't agree with Islam or you don't agree with Judaism or Buddhism or anything like that, technically it can all be used as hate speech. It can all be classified as hate speech, which, yeah, that takes away a big aspect of our free speech. And yes, if they're speaking and they're preaching about going and unaliving people or blowing people up, then yes, the police get involved in that. But if you're just saying that you don't agree with something in society, or you don't agree with, say, sin in society, which is growing exponentially, to be classed as hate speech, I think that's going way beyond the scope and the reach of what state and federal governments should be about.
Intimidate or harass. It expands and strengthens the ban on prohibited symbols, and it makes it easier for the Minister for Home Affairs to cancel or refuse a visa for people intent on spreading hatred. And it creates a new framework that will enable the Minister...
Just like they did with the ISIS brides. They really, stuck to their talk on that. In fact, I think they used the government jets and that to bring them over here. We cannot trust what this Muppet says at all.
For Home Affairs to list organisations as prohibited hate groups. Once an organisation is listed, it will be a criminal offence to be a member, to recruit for it, to donate or receive funds or support that group in any way. The legislation will also set up the National Guns Buyback Scheme, bringing Australia's world-leading gun laws into the 21st century and getting guns off our streets. As I've said before, there are more guns now in Australia than there were.
Let me tell you, Mr. Prime Minister, the guns aren't on our streets. They're in locked cabinets, locked safes, because those of us with firearms licences, we are safe. We are heavily scrutinised. We are heavily regulated. It's the criminals that you import and let into this country that are the ones that are a problem. The ones that took 3 years for then New South Wales government to finally, or police force, sorry, to actually approve a firearms licence for him. Don't blame the firearms owners, the legal licensed ones in Australia, for your ineptitude, your mistakes, your ignorance. It won't wash, it won't be tolerated by Australians.
At the time of the Port Arthur massacre, that is not good enough. The terrorists at Bondi Beach...
Yes, and there's worse politicians in government, and my honest opinion, the Australian Labor Party is a bigger threat to every Australian than what any of the legal licensed law-abiding firearms owners could ever be. This man on the screen is the biggest threat, and the one coming up, Chris Minns. They are the biggest threat to Australian people.
Each had hatred in their minds, but guns in their hands. This law will deal with both, and we do need to deal with both of these issues. I will write...
We're all happy to take questions. Max. Well, look, it's hard to know. I mean, in many respects, these are done behind closed doors. They're not easy to identify. They're very difficult to close down, but increasingly as a result of the broadcast or the dissemination of individual sermons or lectures or hate that's been spewed, that we can identify them. I don't think the rules or the laws have been fit for purpose to confront them in our communities. And in some cases that needs to be direct hate speech laws in the Parliament that mean that you've breached it. And I know that the federal government is taking steps in relation to this all the way down.
Let's put one thing straight. Yes, if they're preaching hatred, preaching unaliving, things like that, yes. Preaching that you don't agree with something isn't hate speech. And you've got to listen carefully to what this Premier is saying, because you can guarantee, because he's Labor, you can guarantee that the rest of the left will get on board, and you will hear the dissemination that, okay, all Christianity is evil, should be hate speech because of what Christianity teaches about homosexuality and things like that. So we need to be very, very careful here, my friends.
To novel but important changes for a local council to confront it in our local community. At the end of the day, these planning laws and regulations either mean something or they don't. Either you can have a prayer hall here or you can't. And I'm just sick of a situation where we can't even close down an illegally operating prayer hall where you should be seeking approval, as does every other business, organisation, corporation, everything from the Boy Scouts to a dump to a garbage disposal unit has to go through the local councils. We're expecting the same things to apply for these centres. Well, not a big role. I mean, at the end of the day, the council has extra powers here rather than a nominal fee to close down an institution, as they do for example, illegally constituted boarding houses. Yes, Anne.
Prayer group in my house every Thursday with 20 people. Am I running an illegal prayer
No,
hall?
you're not. No, it would be that.
That doesn't make sense, because what's then to stop these hate preachers of Islam, the radical Islamists, just going around to people's houses, to congregants' houses, and holding their sort of Bible study or prayer, not Bible because they don't use the Bible, they use the evil Quran, just to speak to, just to discuss their hate speech. These laws do not make sense.
Would be the nominal purpose of that site would be the gathering, a religious gathering, to have a prayer group in that site. And if it was the case that it was operating for another purpose, or it was someone's home, or it was a study group or a Bible group or some other religious affiliation, then it wouldn't apply.
So don't you just push them further into the shadows?
Yeah, look, I've seen that argument in the past, but at the end of the day, it's sort of the releasing a little bit of steam argument in the sense that, look, we need to have it operating at a certain level in our community, and as a result of that, if it does, it will lower the temperature somehow. This is the argument. It'll lower the temperature somehow.
Politicians operate under the guise of the public, but many of them are corrupt.
Now, and B, well, it's better it's operating under our guise, even if it is illegal. I think those days are behind us, and I think in some ways it sends a message that at some level preaching of this nature is allowed in our community, because if it wasn't, the council or the state government or the federal government would have taken action before now. Now, I don't think that's the case, and I think that recent evidence shows us that when we see hate speech in our community, we should take it as read that they're trying to divide our community and they're trying to put hate in someone's heart, and we should confront it where we see it.
How do you differentiate between, say, a Bible group? How do you differentiate between, say, a Bible group using a venue or a prayer hall?
Yeah, as I said, the primary purpose. Paul.
On hate speech, why should the tougher laws only apply when the ground that someone is being victimised on is race or religion?
I knew some left-hard would have to bring sexuality into it.
Or do you think that the federal government should consider all protected attributes, including, for example, sexuality?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to front run their proposed reforms. I'm waiting to see what they are, and when they're introduced, I understand they're imminent. They're not far away. They're really important. I know that this is an area of the law that is not easy to codify, but is absolutely essential that we do it. And I'm sorry, my sense is, despite the difficulty, state governments, federal governments, including my own governments, have been reluctant to step into the breach here because we can't make the perfect law. And I've said in the past, when we introduced hate speech laws in New South Wales that didn't apply to all vulnerable communities, it was because I didn't want to make perfection the enemy of the good or leave a glaring error or gap in the law.
But the Albanese government over the last 2 years, since October 7, 2023, has allowed the hate to enter this country and to fester, to grow like a cancer. And they've ignored the warnings against it. It's just ridiculous.
The good, or leave a glaring error or gap in the law that would see someone being able to preach hate. And in many cases, it should be common civility to apply, the way you interact with somebody, not necessarily the law. But when it comes to racial hatred, we should have very bright, clear red lines.
Have you consulted with religious leaders on this and how to face it?
Not directly, but my understanding is the organisations, our government organisations, have been speaking with different religious groups and organisations. I mean, in many respects, you have to understand that some of our big mosques, our big synagogues, our big churches have gone through an enormous process, a difficult process, to get approval for their mosque or their church or their cathedral. And to see someone operate another one down the road without any kind of approval, I mean, it does fly in the face of the considerable expense and time that they've gone through to get the proper approvals in place. And it might not just be in relation to hate speech. It might not just be in relation to divisive preachers in suburban streets.
I know of a number of mosques or Islamic centres that are operating in residential areas, and on a Friday lunchtime at the designated prayer time, those streets get clogged up with vehicles because of all of these men. It's you never see a woman there at the midday prayer on a Friday, but all of these sort of young men turning up for prayer. They're allowed to leave work and go and spend time. You see all the tradies' cars there. You see, but you see them sitting there for hours afterwards, speaking to the leader of that centre. And tradies, you wonder why you can't get a tradie. They use their prayer sessions to spend time in the centre afterwards, so they don't have to go back to work.
It might be as simple as traffic, or the ability for a council to say this isn't appropriate in this suburban street. So I'm hopeful these laws are taken by local councils. I've seen some mayors that say, great, we don't want to just apply a nominal fine here, we want to actually take action. I've seen some other mayors on television.
That's great, yeah, because in the town where I live, the council, the mayor, is railroading, even to the stage where she's got the police in her back pocket, to stop organisations from feeding and offering support to the homeless and the poor and the destitute in our community. They've stopped us from feeding 180 to 230 people on a Monday afternoon because they didn't want us bringing these people or attracting these people into the centre of town. These are poor people. They're not subhumans. These are people, some of them might have drug problems, but they have problems other than that. And the councils have been given too much power since COVID to do what they like. And now we're seeing councils just treating people like utter garbage. And I'm going to do a video on the council that where I live, and some others around here, because the Queensland councils all got together and had a meeting on how to deal with the homeless and the poor people in the town centres. And it's not in a nice way. It's just sort of shove them out so people don't have to see them. It's all about optics, all about aesthetics to these modern councils.
This morning, one from Fairfield in particular, I mean, that guy's always on TV whinging about something. At the end of the day, it'd be great if you could just grab these initiatives and say, you know what, I'm going to do my bit.
Premier,
Yes.
how are you going to ensure, you said it's applicable to all religions, how are you going to ensure that it doesn't just target, I mean, it's the subtext within the announcement that it's targeting radical Islamist preachers, but how are you going to ensure that it applies to every religion equitably, or just other people using prayer halls?
No, I mean, it applies to everyone. That goes for all of our legislation.
Because it's not other religions, you muppet, that are going around preaching that they want to unalive people, that they want to blow people up, that they want to bring a caliphate against non-believers. The Christian churches I've attended don't do that. So what is this stupid journalist even doing, asking a question like that? We all know what the problem is.
For all of our legislation, that goes for all of our hate speech laws. And I think the best way of demonstrating the government's commitment to have this applying across the board is that people will be arrested and charged for hate speech regardless of who it applies to. And that's happened over the last 2 years since we introduced hate speech legislation. That applies equally for...
Yes, and since then it's in New South Wales. That's where Christians are being cautioned, arrested, detained for praying outside of places like abortion clinics, praying silently, praying in their heads. Or if a transgender or a gay person comes up to a Christian and says, look, I need prayer. If we pray over them and another transgender or gay person takes offence to that, not the person who asked, another one takes offence to that, we can be charged. That's how bad these laws are getting. And these wallies just want to make these laws harder, make them tougher. They want more control, and they want to give the councils more control. And that's the last thing that ratepayers need.
For a young woman that might be wearing a scarf in a suburban street in Sydney, as it applies to an Orthodox Jewish man in Bondi. If you are preaching hate and vilifying someone on Sydney streets, then we have introduced laws to take you on, to confront you, to say that this is not tolerable in a multicultural community in Sydney in 2026.
Young adults who refuse to move, how would you force them to move?
I mean, self-evidently with this legislation.
You've indicated that for any new place of worship, police will need to be consulted before approval is given. What does that consultation look like? Do they actually need to tick it off?
No, the reason for that change is so that you don't have an entity or an organisation constantly moving from one suburban place to another. A gap in the law, understandable in the circumstances, but we're determined to have a situation where we don't see something close. And
so I read into that very, very soon, well, if this legislation gets through very, very soon, they will start putting caps like they did during COVID, when they shut and locked doors of churches, which they should never have done. But they're going to start putting caps on just how many people you can have in your home for a Bible study session, or for a prayer meeting, or for a prayer vigil to pray over inept governments and corrupt politicians. They're going to put caps on everything, and we will pay the price for it.
Tolerable in a multicultural community in Sydney in 2026.
Refuse to move. How do you force them to move?
I mean, self-evidently with this legislation.
You've indicated that for any new place of worship, police will need to be consulted before approval is given. What does that consultation look like? Do they actually need to tick it off?
No, the reason for that change is so that you don't have an entity or an organisation constantly moving from one suburban place to another. A gap in the law, understandable in the circumstances, but we're determined to have a situation where we don't see something close and then reopen a couple of weeks later somewhere else. So we need this intersection to take place between the council and the police. It will require more bureaucracy, it will require more regulation, I accept that. It's not necessarily going to be straightforward, but absolutely essential to make sure that the laws work.
Following up on that, do the police have a veto over a council approval if they say no, you cannot have a prayer?
No, they'll be just supplying the information to say we've shut this down previously. That should go into your decision making about the future place of worship.
So who decides what hate is? Who decides what hate speech?
So they're not actually defining what hate speech is here, which is another very, very dangerous path to go on. So someone eventually or ultimately has to define what that hate speech is, and they're not doing that now. So it could be, hate speech could then be classed as, okay, a Christian pastor preaching a sermon saying, okay, without actually saying the words in the sermon, but can allude to homosexuality is wrong in the eyes of God. That can then be used as hate speech by the left, by these activists on the other side who don't agree with what that pastor's saying. There's no definition. They're giving us no meat on the bone of what this legislation's going to do. So get onto your member of parliament and just tell them you don't agree with this being rushed through.
Is it at the council level, or do police decide?
No, the beauty of this legislation is it's agnostic about hate speech. We're not asking the local councils to draw a distinction between whether it has been a place of hate speech and disunity in our community or not. The simple question that will be applied by the council is, are you operating legally or not? Straightforward.
It's a question before that, but if it's a prayer hall which is operating largely peacefully, there probably won't be a problem on the council's level, right? They'll have to draw a distinction between one that's operating in good faith or bad faith.
They won't. They won't. And I just say, this is one of the problems with regulation. If you're going to have rules and regulations in place and have it apply to a big mosque like the LMA or a big church like St Mary's or St Declan's in Penshurst, it has to apply across the board. You can't have a situation where on the council's website it says these are the conditions to operate a religious institution. It applies to everyone except the 5 or 6 that we just let happen in any event because we can't be bothered regulating it. I mean, that's not fair to the people who play by the rules and go through the process and put in all their documentation.
Shut down once a notice has been issued?
Yeah, there's a scale in there. Obviously, we have put in the regulation, or put in the legislation that the council will be able to apply for utilities to be shut down on a progressive scale. So not immediately, but that'll be spelled out in the legislation.
Could there be a scenario though where police know that there is hate speech occurring or some sort of preaching that they have concerns with, and that they sort of have a conversation with council and say, hey, this is going on, we can't necessarily prosecute these people, but maybe you'd like to apply these laws here?
Look, maybe, but again, I mean, if the rules and regulations are in place and you're expecting organisations...
It doesn't come down to fairness at all. All Labor wants to do is have the power, the ultimate power, to be able to shut down any religious institution they see fit. And you can tell straight away, yes, they might in the first few months attack, or I shouldn't say attack, but they might go in and shut down these radical imam mosques, but then we'll see that being drawn away from that. Mark my words, we will see it heading towards Christian churches and things like that, because we've seen from the very beginning that Albanese doesn't like Israel, doesn't like Jews. He couldn't even attend the funerals for the ones that his government were implicit in having unalived or getting unalived. And when you've got fake people like our Prime Minister, who goes to church to try and before the election to try and bolster up his numbers and things like that, and then goes to gay pride events, and then goes and goes to mosques and things like that, it's atrocious. It's only going to lead a slippery slope to Christianity and the actual faiths of peace being victimised about this or over this.
Novel change to planning laws for local councils, or more powers and more techniques used by law enforcement to confront terrorism where they see it in the community.
Why doesn't the government, state governments, immediately send authorised officers into every single mosque in Australia to get their clarification on whether they actually condemn what happened at Bondi? And if they and ah about it, straight away you know there's something dodgy going on in that mosque, because there's a lot of mosques that are running stuff under the radar that the general public don't know about. And by the sounds of it, ASIO knows about it, but the politicians don't want to know about it. They just want to ignore the warnings, the briefings. There will be further changes, and you can guarantee they will not be pretty for all other people of faith. They're refusing to do, or they've refused for so long to do anything about the religion of peace, Islam, and the radical, the extremist Islam that there is plenty of out there, because they all follow the same book. They all follow that, the Holy Quran, and that teaches hate. So, but they want to be able to penalise and punish every other faith as well. And that's what this is all about. Don't allow yourself to be sort of duped into thinking that this is a good thing. It's not. This is just taking away more of our freedoms. And if you're a Christian, if you're a Buddhist, if you're a Sikh, know this. They're going to come after you. They're going to come after us. This is not about radical Islam, because they don't care about radical Islam. They've done nothing about radical Islam. They've let it grow. And that is very telling. It's the rest of us they really want to come after. That's all I have to say of it. Other than, if you have concerns about this, get onto your local, federal and state members. Tell them your concerns. Don't just let this get rushed through. They're going to put it through. Albo's recalling Parliament Monday and Tuesday next week because he wants to rush this through, because he doesn't want consultation on it. He doesn't want the public or the Conservative politicians to be able to have a say about this. He just wants to lump legislation on hate speech and gun laws into one piece of legislation, which is going to screw us all. And as I said, the ALP, or Labor in general, are a greater threat to Australians and our way of life than any legally vetted, regulated, approved firearms owner, whether it be a hunter, shooter, farmer, hunter, sports shooter or farmer. It doesn't matter. But Labor is the biggest threat to Australian society and Australian freedom and Australian safety. We saw that with Bondi. They let it happen. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, as I said at the beginning, share, like, subscribe, and make sure you just, you get onto your members of parliament and send this far and wide, because people around the world need to see what's going on in Australia, because our mainstream media will not put this out there. They won't, because it doesn't follow Labor's narrative, it doesn't follow the mainstream media narrative. Bless you.